Everyone. I'm just going to wait for people to jump on in. Uh, let's get started with this webinar. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, which is called Navigate Tariffs and Future Disruptions, Practical Steps for Supply Chain Executives. My name is Maria Villablanca. I'm the host of the Transform Talks podcast and the co-founder of TFAST and the Future Insights Network. And I'm going to be your host today. Over the years, I've had the privilege of speaking to hundreds, if not thousands, of senior supply chain leaders about transformation and about all the things that have been happening in supply chain. And I know something that is, well, we can all agree that it's crystal clear that today's environment is full of variables that we can't control, but we can't afford to ignore them either. Disruption no longer comes in neat, isolated events. It's overlapping, it's systemic, and it's showing up in areas we once thought were stable, like trade, for instance. So if you take tariffs, whether it's from the new EU-US agreement to looming global deadlines, tariff policy is now just another wild card in an already complex operating landscape. And yet, for many companies, this really truly remains a blind spot. It's often handled reactively rather than built into long-term planning. And although we're going to be talking about tariffs and they're a big part of today's conversation, this session really is about preparing for the next unknown. So, i.e., replace tariffs with insert here, whatever the next unknown is going to be. And the next hour is about getting real. How do we design supply chains that aren't just agile in theory, but genuinely built for volatility? And where are companies getting stuck right now? How do you go from insight to execution before the next wave of change hits your business? This session is hosted in partnership with Optilogic, a company empowering global supply chains to simulate disruption, design better networks, and outperform under pressure. And I'm thrilled to be joined by two of our brilliant guests here. We've got Gavin Schwarzenbach, who's formerly of Nestlé Waters and has led transformation from the inside of one of the world's most sophisticated supply chain systems. We've got Max Mascarenhas, who's VP of Strategic Accounts at Optilogic, and whose expertise lies in helping companies translate complexity into clarity. Now, we're going to spend the next hour digging into what it really takes to build supply chains that perform, even when the future doesn't go to plan. Right. So if you've attended one of my sessions before, you know that I will have prepared a set of focused questions, but I also want your input. This is a session that's going to be recorded, but we really want to make this interactive. It's live, and we want you to drop your comments and questions in the chat throughout the entire time so I can ask our panelists these questions as we go. So I'm not the kind of person that likes to leave these questions to the end. So please, by all means, just throw them into the chat. Okay, before we get started, I want to take a moment to briefly introduce again, or have them reintroduce themselves to our audience. Gavin, do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Gavin Schwarzenbach. I worked with Nestlé for 36 years. I was working across multiple different countries, and I ran global supply chains, European supply chains, and North American supply chains. In my last job, we were moving over 40 million pallets a year, and with a logistics cost of 2.4 billion. And in terms of managing disruption, I think we always focused on a Friday afternoon. It seemed that there would be a new challenge coming up, quality issues also with duties, and so lots of great operational experience of running large complex supply chains.
Great. Thanks, Gavin. Max?
Thanks, Maria. Hello, everyone. Good to be here. My name is Max Mascarenhas. I lead one of our go-to-market organizations at Optilogic. I've been with Optilogic for 2.5 years, and I have the pleasure and the honor to work with folks around the world that are trying to enhance their supply chain and to, as Maria mentioned, to make sense of the complexity that's ever increasing in today's very uncertain and volatile world. So we try to apply our expertise as well as technology to help folks to make sense of all that. So looking forward to the discussion today and to connecting with you guys and hopefully helping you to enhance your supply chains as well.
Thanks very much. Okay, so let's dive in. I'm going to open up with the question about noise, right? There's a lot of noise out there, tariffs and geopolitical and tsunamis and lots of different things. So why should supply chain leaders really care about disruptions like tariffs right now? What's different about that today? Max, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, well, Today, there's a saying, right, that sales bring top line numbers, supply chain delivers profits, right? So it has become with all the disruptions that are taking place, with all the volatility, with all the uncertainty, it has become paramount that companies have a very resilient supply chain, not just what used to be just-in-time supply chains proven to be somewhat detrimental when we went through COVID, for instance, where there was lots of disruptions, and those supply chains were not agile, they were not flexible to respond to those disruptions. So this paradigm of having a very optimized for cost supply chain has been replaced by still paying tons of attention to cost, but also being able to insert resiliency, insert agility and flexibility into supply chains. So it's, obviously has become clear to companies all over the world that to accomplish that, you need to bring technology, but not only technology, because technology will, alone won't solve this problem. You need to bring expertise. You need to have really shifts in how you manage the supply chain. Digital transformation needs to be front and center. Even the way you manage your teams and the way you operate your supply chain, it's extremely important. The whole idea of having, centralized decisions and centers of excellence has also proven to become more and more of a bottleneck. So a hybrid approach where, there is a center of excellence, but also working with networked teams that have the ability and the autonomy to make decisions on the fly at the speed of business has become paramount.
What do you think, Gavin?
So, I mean, living through COVID in terms of a step change increase in volatility and challenges and major shifts in demand, adding on top, and since COVID, I mean, there's been lots of issues. And then you add on top of that the tariffs, which are major financial impacts. So clearly there needs to be a very different way of looking across the supply chain. And I think there's a tendency or there's a risk of focusing on the tariffs, but there's also the knock-on impact on demand, on inflation, the risk at supplier level. So you may just look at your own company, but a lot of the issues could come upstream. And so I really think it just accelerates and brings to a new level what we've been challenged with over the last few years, and the pace of change as well, in terms of the almost daily and weekly changes and announcements. The intensity is then significantly higher.
Gavin, I want to ask you this question. When it comes to tariffs or trade disruptions, who do you think in the business owns that conversation? And do you think that supply chain teams need to be brought in earlier, or are they brought in early enough?
Yeah, in my experience, supply chain should be leading this. We're the ones looking end to end, looking and usually coming when there's a problem, or it's really a force to be able to be working all the way across the supply chain with suppliers, with manufacturing, with customers. So I really believe supply chain should be front and foremost of this, and taking it to the business with the scenarios, the opportunities, and the risks. And opportunities is important because it's not just risks. You can turn, what is a challenge. There are things that you can do differently in order to better react.
This morning I was having a conversation with an executive from the pharmaceutical industry, and we were both saying, gosh, do you remember when VUCA was around? Do you remember? Don't you miss VUCA days? Don't we all miss VUCA? What we're in right now is certainly not that. We've got our first question from the audience, which is great. So I want to ask this question. Let's see. It's from Neil Morris, and he asks, In our organization, we're observing what we believe are remnants of supply shock, potentially coming from the deliberate delays or holds that many companies placed on importing goods back into the US back in February. In the February-April period when tariffs were higher. Any tips to gaining deeper visibility in our suppliers' supply chains, which are a blind spot? Example, you may know where your direct supplier manufactures, but not where their raw materials are coming from, and therefore where there may be more risk requiring different mitigations. Neil, thanks for that. Max, what do you think of that?
Yeah, that's that's a common problem, right? That lack of visibility. So, there are different ways to approach that. Particularly, I see the companies that have been addressing that well. They have really invested in two areas. One, just visibility across their supply chain and suppliers through technologies that track, shipments, orders, where things are, inventory, etc. But also the ability to put in place continuous scenario modeling, right? Because where you don't have data, where you don't have visibility, or where it's hard to, we all know forecasting and predicting things is extremely difficult. And quite often companies are off when they, even after investing millions of dollars in trying to build a predictive capability, that's still off. So modern days companies are actually investing in scenario modeling at scale, right? So instead of trying to predict a certain point in the future, run a range of scenarios that basically cover 95% of what those points could be, and then be prepared and you understand how to react and how to handle each of those scenarios, right? So we see that scenario modeling, continuous scenario modeling at scale, done in conjunction with the business. To Gav's point, a point that Gavin made earlier, it can't be just supply chain and the core supply chain people, right? It's important to involve the business as well. That collaboration, it becomes essential in running, scenarios at scale, and be able to understanding what's the operational curve that they might be subjected to, and then having alternatives to react when those unfortunate but almost certain disruptions take place.
And what about the the conversation around business processes, right? I mean, you're trying to gain visibility, but in a way, you're trying to redesign your supply chain here to build it to create a more resilient supply chain. So, how much of the conversation, and I'm going to get here with the question because I see this every day. Executives are busy running the day to day. Yeah, they need to respond to clear demand signals, clear issues around the day-to-day running of their businesses. They need to keep costs down. So what practical advice do you have to people about trying to implement the kind of thinking that you need to have to create the supply chain that will weather the next instability? In your experience, what have you seen? How have you managed and balanced that, Gavin?
So to me, I think one aspect of the tariffs is it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to mobilize the organization and to bring in extra resources to do things differently. So to really say, we need to put a task force on this, we need to stop a lot of the non-critical projects and really mobilize to get the right visibility. And we were talking just before about visibility. The challenge on visibility is there's more visibility than we've ever had in terms of tracking where things are. But knowing what is critical out of that visibility is a major challenge, especially the more upstream you go to suppliers.
Why? Why?
Because there's loads of information, hundreds of containers, but which of those are critical from your inventory point of view? Is 1 day late critical? More days late critical? So I think, as you said about the process, I think mobilizing the teams to be working upstream with suppliers, IT to be pulling together and getting better visibility. This is an opportunity. So where you haven't done it, you can use the tariffs to really get much more focus and do things differently.
Okay. Just a couple things. We're getting a lot of questions, which is great. One, we've had a question about Gavin, a couple difficult people with difficulty hearing Gavin. Is everybody else having any issues hearing you? So let us know if you're also experiencing issues. There's another follow-up question to Gavin. Let's see, another question. You mentioned the experience in moving significant volumes of goods. Do you have any views on how best to understand where vulnerabilities, hold on, trying to read this while all the things come in, vulnerabilities exist, and then how then to know where to build flex or slack into the supply chain, and how to tie real-time alerts to this? Okay.
Wow. So, I think I mean, we were moving big volumes and we were also very seasonal and very weather dependent. And so I think you build up a certain experience in terms of holiday weekends when there's going to be high weather. So, that is one thing. I think the knowledge of people in the business, sometimes we don't harness that enough. And when we're doing analytics and when we're doing models, potentially it's too much in a back room and there isn't enough connection with the people who are really on the ground doing the job. So having a broader team to address and to be really mapping out, okay, where are the biggest risks, and then to challenge them. I think in the last few years, I found it very effective to really challenge people to say, how do we avoid this potential risk impacting the business? And it put people out of their comfort zone. You really say, look, we need to do things differently. How can we maybe build up inventory? How can we maybe bring on a new supplier significantly faster than in the past? But if you put the size of the prize as being a major loss of sales or a major stop of a factory because of lack of supply, then you can then justify and get people really focused on the essential.
There's a question here about, sorry, go ahead, Max, go ahead.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think that's where technology plays a significant role, right?
Yeah.
Because not as a end-all be-all answer, but as an enabler and a catalyst, right? Because to Gavin's point, all these things require people to really work together, collaborate, and extract insights, not just data points, right? Because there are lots of data points available to everybody. Sometimes actually too much that becomes hard to comprehend, hard to make sense of it, and becomes noise.
You get that paralysis.
And then,
you get that paralysis.
Exactly. And then there is that, fatigue. Well, where everybody's experiencing a little bit of the, disruption fatigue, tariffs fatigue, data fatigue, right? Too much, hard to make sense of it. And then people then say, you know what, I'm just going to wait and see, or I'm just going to let this kind of play out, which is sometimes an organic or natural way to think, but it could be disastrous, right? So technology plays a significant role. For instance, Optilogic has, been leading globally in this forefront of bringing, very robust algorithms, very robust optimization capability, very robust simulation capability, but democratizing that to a wide range of business users by making the technology accessible at the expertise of the end user, right? In previously with legacy technology and legacy solutions, there was this, basically build the technology and they will come, right? Or they'll learn, they'll figure out. We have, through our learnings over time, we've realized that, it's important that technology becomes accessible, that and we need to crunch the learning curve for technology. And we've been able to address that by leveraging AI, in a very pragmatic approach to AI. We didn't jump in the bandwagon of AI and say, hey, we have AI, solutions. We were very diligent in making sure that we apply AI in a very pragmatic way to basically reduce this learning curve necessary to extract insights and actionable insights from technology, right? So we deployed AI, and we even leverage things that are available and well known by everybody, like Excel, for instance. But we leverage that.
I was going to ask you, there was a question around there. Someone asked a question here about how much of this is AI and machine learning versus APS, or with APS, or are we just speaking about Excel, SQL, and Microsoft tools?
I see. So it's actually, sorry, just it's actually Yeah, a combination of those, right? So we leverage things like Excel because that's very everybody has access to it, everybody knows how to use it, but we connect Excel to a very robust model in the back end that has
Mm.
best practices built into it, that has the algorithms and has very powerful solvers, right? Because Excel doesn't really offer a solver that's robust enough for a company, but Excel is an interface for people to interact with a very robust and powerful backend. It's a fantastic tool because the learning curve for Excel is zero. Everybody has access, everybody knows how to use it, right? So I think I applaud our engineering team. I think they were very clever in leveraging everything in the most powerful modern capabilities they're offered by cloud computing and by AI, but to make that very accessible and not to make people have to learn a new technology or something very complex, we've been able to democratize and extend that via very simple apps, leveraging Excel as an interface.
Yeah. And I
Ooh,
think,
go ahead, Gavin.
so just building on what Max said, I think Optilogic, from my experience, it it opens up a new way of working. I think in the past, design was done by a few people very much in a back office. And that's why I was talking about the connection through to the business. So there are new features, there's new abilities of working as teams, two people working on the same model. Extremely easy to connect to Power BI, to Excel, and to be able to very quickly build some simple but extremely powerful tools that can be used. So I think the barrier to entry is a key thing, because one of the challenges, and I work with lots of different companies, is I think the time to build the models is far too long for a lot of companies. And I think the technology has a part to play in that. So, having a very easy to learn system with very good support material, very good support, those are all key things that are fundamental. But I do, and this is a challenge maybe to people on the call to think about. I feel that senior leaders demand too much precision in order to trust the results of a model. So the modelers feel that unless they've got an accurate number, they're going to get shot down in a meeting. And so therefore they spend a lot longer to get that precision, but we're in an extremely volatile situation. And so I think we can again use tariffs as an opportunity to say, look, we need multiple scenarios. We need to do them quickly. And once we start homing in on maybe the one that we're going to go with, then we can start adding in some of the precision. So it's about trying to bring in a different way of working and using tariffs as a platform in order to do that.
It's an interesting question that Valerie LeBlanc just put up. I really liked it. I wanted to ask it because it ties into what you were saying about it's not just about the tech, it's also a different style of managing. And that's the question here. Don't you think we need to move towards different management type to be able to operate a network and have the right level of empowerment where action takes place? We can't expect supply chain alone to fix the issue and continue to reduce costs without a clear global strategy with the right level of skill and true empowerment. So how much of a roadblock is it when you have this sort of disjointed or disconnected management style where maybe one part of the organization wants to go in one direction, the other part wants to cut costs and maybe solve the day-to-day problems? So Gavin, how do you connect the dots between these two? How do you create a different management style for today's age?
I actually think COVID helped us. I mean, I spent years where we were under such pressure to reduce costs, to run on virtually no inventory. And then suddenly you're missing massive sales because the world has changed.
Mm.
And, so that I think was a big eye opener to a lot of people. And I think now there is much more recognition that maybe a slightly lower risk approach or a more agile risk might cost a little bit more to put in place that agility, but the benefit in terms of being able to react to the marketplace, being able to not lose sales, is then a fundamental value add. but it's up to us to take that argument forward together with, you know, our peers. But we need to build and show those arguments to say we need to maybe to invest. Sometimes you don't, but we need to have the agility. We need to have the resilience, and we can't just go for the cheapest, lowest inventory, lowest cost necessarily across the whole supply chain.
Mm. Got a question here, Robert. Great point. Perfection is the enemy of good. Simulation modeling and tariff responses extend to managing and navigating all types of disruptions to enable leaders and supply chain professionals to make swift strategic decisions. Human intelligence is an imperative. Technology alone is not the magic bullet. Also, creating agility is an organizational, multidimensional strategy that is not just embedded in supply chain proficiency. Love that, Robert. Great question. So, Max, from your perspective, you see a lot of companies, a lot of different industries. What is the one thing they get wrong when trying to build or tackle this whole idea about resilience?
Yeah, great question, Robert. You should be a panelist here with us. Great way to put it. So, I think that companies earlier on, they thought about digital transformation as just moving from, analog to digital, right?
Hmm.
Which is comprehensible. It was the early stages, and it was just like, let's digitize everything, and that's digital transformation. Well, as they went through that, they realized that, wow, no, we haven't really achieved our end goal, which was to actually actionable insights and have more intelligence. So I think that companies have awakened to the fact that true transformation, it's not just going from analog to digital, but it's actually creating a core operating capability, operating model that has embedded in it agility, adaptability, intelligence, right? So it's leveraging technology, as I said earlier, as an enabler for, accomplishing two things. One, democratizing decision making, and two, making those decision support, making those decisions more intelligent at speed, at scale,
Mm.
right? So I think what companies have got wrong in the past, but I think, there is even the questions here demonstrate that there is an awakening going on and a realization that we need to go beyond. And it's, to Gavin's point, it's not just about cutting costs. It's about putting systems in place, systems that rely on technology and people and processes that will enable this agility, this adaptability and intelligence, and make this part of the core operating capability of companies, right? And obviously, you need technology as a catalyst for that. So companies have
Mm.
partnered with Optilogic to deploy exact that. But it's not just a technology deployment. It's a technology as a catalyst, as an enabler in bringing people together, in inspecting the processes and the workflows, and sometimes redesigning them, sometimes enhancing them, but putting in place this capability of, let's make decisions. I talk to companies all over the world, and and even in the last 2 years, I've seen a significant change. Early on, they didn't necessarily wanted to adopt our apps. They're like, no,
Hmm.
just want to have the center of excellence running this. But then because in their mind, they were thinking it's going to take tremendous effort. We're going to have to mobilize IT. We're going to have to mobilize all these different areas of the organization to be able to put this in place. So we're going to tackle this 3 years, 4 years down the road. But once they start seeing the simplicity of putting these things in place nowadays, right? With cloud computing technology and all that the cloud computing brings, and with AI, they've started accelerating the rollout of these apps and this collaboration. So we see companies that even after selecting us, they had thought that, well, we're gonna just do the center of excellence approach, and then later on we'll take on the collaboration. We've seen those timelines being shortened and then, adopting that much faster, right? Which then gives ultimately the capability they're looking for, which is agility, intelligence, and adaptability. And that serves for tariffs or any kind of disruption that they may face.
There's another question here, and I want to get to that, which is around budget limitations. because, we have during COVID, I guess we went from pre-COVID to it was all cost-driven decision making. Then COVID was all about building resilience and agility. Then we slipped back into cost-driven decision making. So how much, Karai asked this question here, do you see budget limitations in the market and cost management obstacles to invest into the right technology? So do you think a lot of people are making those financially driven decisions? And is that costing them in the long run? Max? Oh, well, Gavin, go for it. No.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think
Yeah.
there will always be the budget limitations and the challenges. But if in a period like now with the tariffs and with the disruption, we cannot create the compelling arguments to show the financial impact, the financial risk to the business of the different. So we've talked, I mean, it's about building the scenarios, using the technology of what you have already in as simple a way as possible, but really show the financial risks and show the potential opportunities. And then budget should become much less of a discussion because you're really saying that for the amount that we need to invest to tackle this issue, then the size of the prize is massive, or the size of the risk if we get it wrong is significant. And I think it's really changing the discussion.
I think people are much more open
Yeah.
to that discussion, and it's something. But I think supply chain executives need to also be able to feel empowered to have the conversation around risk, as opposed to just the cost-driven decision making. Supply chain leaders are essentially the operatives in charge of risk in an organization. So it's the finance person who is, but
Yeah.
supply chain leaders have full control over one of the riskiest parts of business.
But I think,
There's a follow.
Yeah. And
Yeah, go ahead.
I would just add to that, it is unfortunate, but we all are driven by, cost and financial decisions, right?
Mm.
And sometimes that might be detrimental because that gives us a myopic approach and we don't consider certain risks, or we don't consider the entirety of the opportunity and the cost of opportunity in front of us. So I think, it takes a conscious effort of individuals, of leaders, of supply chain people working with finance to always bring that up, to the forefront of the discussion, that it can't just be driven on the financial impact of today. Let's consider the financial impact of today, the capability that gives us, and the financial impact and the capability of tomorrow. But that's where also we at Optilogic have, innovated tremendously in technology, but also in the business model to try to bridge that gap and to make it easier for companies to actually deploy this technology and justify. So we actually give access to our software at no cost, right? Which is really unheard of. I've been in software sales for 23 or going 24 years. Don't let my young look fool you. I've been around for a while, but I've never had that available to me before, and I don't know of any other circumstance where a company can actually utilize the software to help build a business case for buying the software or investing in the software later, right? At no cost. So this has really revolutionized how people invest in supply chain design, in scenario modeling software, because they have the ability to build that business case without having to make any significant investment.
Gavin?
Yeah, so I saw a question pop up and I was about to say earlier, I think one of the challenges is that many companies are very reactive, and that we need to try to get to be more proactive. And I mean, clearly when tariffs come in like a tidal wave, we need to react to them. But if we mobilize and we start to build multiple scenarios of possible future actions and possible future scenarios, then we can use those to proactively start to drive business decisions to reduce the risk in the future and to make the supply chains more agile and more resilient. So I think part of it is the mindset of we need to really invest a bit more in the short term, which is easy to say when you're in a crisis and when you're getting all the questions, but it's clearing the decks of the non-essentials to really start building those proactive scenarios to say, how should we move in the future? And then a slight comment when we were talking about budgets is I don't think we're necessarily very good, and I say we as a generality, we've got lots of people on. I think we can do a much better job of really showing the financials, and a good set of scenarios run on a tool like Optilogic, showing those financial risks, the potential lost sales, that can make a much more compelling argument to other senior stakeholders in order to then take the action. So I think we need to, probably across all of what I'm saying is it's about taking this to really step up the game on speed, reduction of precision, getting really good scenarios to then drive more proactive approach looking forward.
So do you think, going back to the original question about visibility, do you think that one of the first exercises that need to happen is to really get to the bottom, understand the visibility of your end-to-end supply chain and where the risks are? And how much of that, because you talked about, Gavin, at one point, having maybe a separate team working on this sort of task force or project to do something. How long is this a parallel thing, alongside the day-to-day business? And how do you manage something like that, to build your business case? And how much it is someone like Optilogic involved in that process, because you kind of have to do the job as well to showcase that this is going to yield something relatively quickly.
Yeah. So my experience, I don't know how general it is. I mean, I've spoken to other companies since, that often the Friday afternoon phone calls where we had a major quality issue at a supplier or a problem on supply, so a risk becoming a reality, was not necessarily a big supplier that we have a close partnership with. It was a small supplier who, even if we'd have sat down and mapped it out, we might not have put them high on the radar. So I think, which is not saying you shouldn't be really mapping out and working with suppliers, but I think separating slightly a team to be really looking at that while you can be modeling and bringing in the key things that they come up with. I think you need to be doing it in parallel. And the visibility, a lot of it is also connection with the suppliers. It's really talking to them and understanding their upstream. How are they managing it? How are they managing the risk? You can't get it from data and systems alone. It's it's really relationships, understanding the industries that they're in. So it's really moving from just focusing on cost cutting, but really to then supply reliability as being a key focus.
Mm. And how much of it is a mindset thing? You brought it up earlier, Gavin. Is there a mindset shift that needs to happen in the supply chain function to maybe unlearn or relearn the whole supply chain process from linear to to something else?
There's probably multiple mindset changes. I mean, a lot is said about linear to network and so on. I think good connection with the key people across the supply chain, good visibility and information linked with that, and then good tools to allow you to make decisions and to manage are the three things that need to come together. And if you have the tools, but without the good data or without the human input, then I don't think you'll get the right result. So I think it is a paradigm shift, but tariffs can be an opportunity to make those changes that you would need to be doing anyway, or ought to be doing anyway.
Because there's just too much uncertainty with the tariffs, and it
Yeah.
changes on a day-to-day basis. So clearly something needs to be done I mean, you can't anticipate everything. There's a question, again, follow-up from Robert, who asked that brilliant question beforehand. One thing I hear from executives I speak with and work with is, how do you transition strategy to granular activities? What advice do you have for leaders to empower accelerated tactical activities that drive agility? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah. Yeah, I will speak to that. So it's a great one, and I think it brings it all together here because for instance, when I'm talking about agility in the supply chain, there's really two dimensions to that. There's the agility of the supply chain responding to a certain disruption, but I also see agility as the speed of ingesting data. Processing the data through the model and evaluating trade-offs, right? So speed to analysis, speed to having, understanding and be able to make decisions. And Robert has a great point. The way to accomplish this is a change in mindset where you have tactical models that are being run by business users across the business. They have a finger on the pulse. They have very, access to what's happening at the minute, at the hour. So if they have a model, if they have a back end that supports that, once they have access to that, additional data point or new data point, if they can put that through a scenario, run that quickly and get a response back in minutes, that brings that agility that they require to enable tactical decisions in the supply chain, right? So I think that also compensates for the lack of visibility because one thing that's important we've already talked about here. It's really important not to let perfect become an enemy of good. It's really important not to have paralysis analysis. It's really important not to have a bias for action and a bias for time to speed versus being, sitting and waiting for it. So all these things can be addressed by this shift in mindset and by technology enabling this collaboration and this back and forth between business users that are at the very forefront where these disruptions are taking place and the backbone of the supply chain, which is the modeling team with the center of excellence, right? And I think that, yeah, this collaboration between them and the agility to bring data, refresh the models, run the models, and quickly get trade-offs evaluated on the fly, addresses all these issues. Obviously, it's not necessarily a one size fits all. Different companies are going to have different approaches to it, but it's definitely a business capability that every single company should have, and I see working on.
But where do people get stuck? Do you know what I mean? We make it sound so easy. We make it sound so easy, but it's not. I mean, we know that transformations have failed in the past. They're failing today. We know that I mean, I have been in this industry a long time, and we've been talking about end-to-end supply chain visibility for a very long time.
Yeah.
So, what happens? Why isn't this working
Well,
as well as it should be?
I mean, even if we don't talk end to end within a company, most companies have major challenges on the data within the company, either between divisions or
Mm.
so. And again, we've been talking about that for 10 years. And I think potentially, unfortunately, we might be talking about it for a few more years to come. So I think we need to find ways to get the data good enough but without getting lost on it being 100%
Perfect.
perfect. And that again is a mindset change, not just for the modelers and the modeling team and the IT team, but also for the other stakeholders who expect perfection and they expect it to look identical. So I think data within the enterprise and then connections outside of the enterprise, it's easy to say we're going to connect with our suppliers, but the openness and the commercial relationships is not necessarily that you can get, open discussions about the risks and their strategy for dealing with the tariffs. And so these are challenges that we will have, whatever technology you're using, and probably whatever industry you're in. But the way to get around them is, in my view, is the mindset and the approach, and then the people connections and building the relationships and building some trust and some openness across the extended supply chain.
Also
Mhm. And
adjusting
I would
from
add
a
that,
senior level perspective as well, adjusting the expectations that they have. Sorry,
And
go ahead,
that's what I
Max.
meant, that's what I meant on the
Yeah.
stakeholders requiring precision, and then the modelers and the modeling team, if the data is not perfect, they cannot move ahead. And then people complain, why does it take months to build a model? You know, that's
mhm. Yeah, but it's also, I don't think we arrived here by accident, right? And absolutely, the people get stuck on data, right? So basically, to your question, Maria, people get stuck on data, but I don't think we got here by accident. The fact is that we have a natural tendency that we want things to be really precise and accurate, right? So that's kind of, if it's precise and accurate, it's better. We have that a little bit, which is a fallacy sometimes, but also previous technologies in modeling, you really need to, it was so cumbersome to run. It took so much time to actually get to a result that you really only had the opportunity to run a model once a week, or it would take hours, right? And if it wasn't right, we'd have to start the process from scratch, and it would take, days to get it done again. So people it was trying to get the data as clean and as precise as possible, because they knew that, okay, once I put this through this process, right, to get a result, if it's wrong, it's going to take me a lot of time to do it again. With modern technology like what Optilogic has put out that leverages cloud computing and AI and many other capabilities, it's much easier to run several iterations of the same model, right? So that also diminishes the need for the very first iteration of the data to be quote unquote perfect, right? Get some, obviously you're not going to input data that you know it's horrible, but get some, don't need to, Gavin's point, don't need to be super precise. Get some data in, run through the model, right? In minutes you're going to get an output. That output could be directional or could give you some insights on what data points are lacking and what the data is bad. And then you go it again, and you can do this, several times in an hour or in a few hours, as opposed to previously where you would do this once a week because it was so much, wrestling around with the manual things, right? We've automated this in a way that you can start with okay data and then just go through and just get some insights or start getting some early insights that will indicate the direction that you need to go with your decision, or will indicate, some issues with the data that you can then go and address, right? And we've seen that, taking place across our customer base, where, to that Gavin's point, people are not so obsessed about the data being perfect anymore. Now they shift that obsession in insights. Now I'm really getting actionable insights, and that's what I need, because we're talking about volatility. Even if the data was perfect, there some volatility, some uncertainty is going to make that data obsolete, a week from now. So trying to find, the perfect data by design, with the level of volatility and the pace of disruption that we live in today, that data becomes obsolete anyway, even if it was perfect. It will never be perfect, but even if it
I was just going to
was.
say, not just the pace of technological change, pace of geopolitics, pace of everything going on. Things are moving way too quickly. I mean, that's going back to the whole.
Hmm.
Don't we miss VUCA? That we
Hmm.
have different problems today. There's
Hmm.
someone here. Masha mentions, love your point on trust, Gavin. I believe it takes a lot of time to build that trust between commercial teams and supply chain to have the necessary conversations and drive speed and decision making. How have you been able to build that trust between leaders? Gavin, thoughts?
yeah. I mean, I think so. We're talking about tariffs today, but in the past, I found that if there is a compelling issue like carbon footprint, sustainability, COVID, ensuring supply, and now using tariffs, there you can put on a platform a discussion to say, look, how can we together work to minimize the impact across the extended supply chain? So you can come in with a different conversation rather than the normal, how can we get it cheaper? It can be a win-win, because it's not good for a supplier or a supplier's supplier, to have issues. So how can we together with the upstream supply chain work to better manage during this highly volatile situation? And I think having those platforms, having that communication basis can be very powerful to change the narrative and to talk about other things.
I want to, we've got 10 minutes left, so I want to give our audience a little bit more information about what they can get from this type of thinking. So, two things going on. Number one is I'd like to ask our audience to sort of maybe in the chat write out what you think are your blockages with regards to dealing with resilience or building that kind of resilience in a disruptive environment. Because from there, I'd get some insight on that. And then, secondly, Max, I want to start with you. With organizations that are waiting and seeing about AI or waiting for the perfect data set or whatever it is, where can executives start now? What key takeaways can you give in terms of practical advice for people that are looking to build that agility? And when we start getting in the chat, what disruptions, what people are seeing, what should they take away? And then from there, Max, if we go to you, Gavin, and you give us your take.
Sure. So my recommendation would be to embrace technology, as I said before, as an enabler, as a catalyst of a shift in mindset. And that shift in mindset has basically, I would say, two pillars to it. One, how to embed, how to deploy collaboration across your organizations, because that collaboration is going to surface more intelligence, more people, more buy-in. It's going to break silos, right? We've talked a little bit about silos here, about trust, etc. If the business users, the people that are actually acting on change, if all they see is a black box in a modeling team that and then it comes with some recommendations that they don't understand how they arrived at those recommendations, that's where that trust becomes difficult to be built. If they participate in the process, right? If they collaborate, if they understand, if they're running scenarios themselves, that empower them and makes them to trust and embrace the modeling capability, right? And the other pillar is that because of advancements in technology and that Optilogic has brought into the fray, companies don't have to rely just on optimization. They can now also leverage simulation to stress test the performance of their supply chains, right? This gives them a wide range of questions and a wide range of visibility and capability and intelligence that they didn't really have at scale before, right? So everybody's, optimization was looking for the cheapest way to structure your supply chain. Let's find that optimum based on cost. But we have been able to continue to offer that, but also bring other dimensions to Gavin's point: sustainability, risk, right? Service levels, performance, and simulation is a fantastic tool to introduce how volatility over time would impact the supply chain, right? And give people that perspective around the supply chain performance, not just the supply chain optimum point, right? So those things are things that really, and I would say again, perfect's an enemy of good. Always, have a bias for action, get started, and evolve. And the evolution is not years long. The evolution is months because of the speed of how technology and cloud computing has enabled us to be much, much more agile, right? So that would be my recommendation, not to get stuck and to start seeing real value being unlocked across the business and across the supply chains would be that.
Thanks for that. And Gavin?
I had quite a different approach to a lot of my peers, and when there was something like this, I would roll my sleeves up and go and sit with the team, and not full time, but I would really be there with them, seeing the issues and understanding how they were working, and really trying to then enable the right level of precision models and scenarios. And I think you learn a lot by just going down looking, talking. And the great thing about something like Optilogic is you can run a couple of scenarios very quickly and easily, and see and understand, okay, how can we use this technology better? It's very quick to build models. If you want a really large, complex model with everything precise, then that can, take longer. So I think getting involved and not just being briefed in meetings, for me, has been very powerful, to really understand some of the key things, that the key challenges that people are facing, and some of the key issues that the business is facing.
Mm. I'm seeing a lot of questions, or sorry, a lot of comments here about a bit of a disconnect between leadership and the conflict of objectives. Short-term objectives, demonstrable ROI, profit margins, the financial metrics, the cost-driven decision making, and actually demonstrating the value of resilience. Let's see. We've got another thing Robert writes here. Some insights. Organizations and executives share a common thread that information overload, big data, and digital ecosystem complexities are both an enabler and a barrier. The challenge is within larger global organizations with sophisticated integrated supply chains with dependency on a diverse group. Oh, well, then more people are writing, so it throws it up. Diverse group of suppliers. Simulation models that harness data intelligence can be difficult because of the evolving globalized landscape. I'll tell you what, from what I'm hearing, I think we need another webinar on demonstrating the value of the risk and resilience conversation to leadership. I think, don't you think? I mean,
Yeah,
it
and
seems
I
to
think it's
me.
yeah, and I think it's what I said earlier, where I don't think we do a good enough job of presenting compelling cases in order to
Mm.
change from just the short term to the longer term, and in order to get the business, the CFO, CEO to invest in agility and resilience. And I think that I took that always as my responsibility. If I didn't if we're not able to present a compelling argument, they will just be saying, deliver more and at lower cost. So I think a further discussion on that, I think, would be really quite beneficial.
So for those of you watching
Great.
and here and you're connected with me on LinkedIn, or if you have my email, just send me an email if you'd like to see a webinar on that topic, because I just I'm getting it regularly. So it'd be good to maybe have a working think tank with executives who've had the experience in trying to drive that conversation forward. I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank Gavin and Max for sharing. I want to thank all of you who've joined us, and I want to thank Optilogic for being so open and sharing case studies and examples of how you've done things in the past. So thank you very much for watching. Those of you that watched here, you can feel free to recommend this to a friend or a colleague. This is going to be on demand. You can watch it there. If you're not connected with Optilogic, please do so. Max will be reaching, we'll be happy to talk to you. And Gavin, no doubt, will be happy to share as well. And of course, follow me and follow my content. And I look forward to putting out more things like this. So stay safe, everyone, and let's see what happens in the game of geopolitical disruption. Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. Thanks for having me.